The day Earth burned began like any other day. The sun rose slowly, painting the clouds in gold, and people moved through their lives with no idea that the sky itself would soon betray them. Children laughed on their way to school. Workers hurried through crowded streets, and families planned their evenings. For one brief moment, humanity was at peace. Then the shadows arrived. It began with silence. Satellites orbiting Earth went dark, one after another, like candles being snuffed out by an unseen hand. Scientists stared in confusion at blank screens, not knowing that death was already on its way. Then, without warning, the first ships appeared, black, jagged shapes that swallowed the sunlight as they descended through the clouds. At first, people thought they were meteors or some strange storm. Crowds gathered in the streets, pointing at the sky with wonder and fear. Phones captured the moment, streams spread the images, and millions watched as the truth revealed itself. These were not storms, not rocks, not illusions. They were ships, alien ships. The invasion did not come with words. No message of peace, no warning. The sky opened with fire. A single beam of white-hot energy tore across New York City, cutting skyscrapers in half as if they were made of paper. Glass shattered, steel melted, and in seconds the city that had stood for centuries was gone. Tokyo followed, then Moscow, then Karachi, then London. The aliens struck the beating hearts of human civilization with perfect precision, choosing not soldiers but civilians, not weapons but homes. They did not come to conquer. They came to erase. The firestorm spread across the planet. Oceans boiled where their weapons touched the waves. Forests turned into fields of ash. Streets once full of life became rivers of flame. Mothers screamed for their children. Fathers shielded their families with bare hands, and everywhere, people ran with nowhere to go. And above it all, the alien fleet moved slowly like predators circling prey. Their ships did not rush. They did not fear. They knew humanity was unprepared. They knew no army could stop them. Yet even in the chaos, even as cities fell, something within humanity refused to die. In the ruins of Paris, firefighters pulled strangers from collapsed buildings. In the burning streets of Beijing, soldiers fought with weapons too small to matter. But they fought anyway, refusing to surrender. In small towns and villages, families huddled together, whispering prayers, promising one another that they would survive. The aliens had expected silence. They had expected despair. But instead, Earth screamed. Radio signals burst through the static, voices of survivors calling out, demanding resistance. Across the shattered continents, ordinary people rose, carrying wounded neighbors, forming groups, searching for food, refusing to let the fire consume their hope. Still, the destruction was beyond imagining. Billions were lost in the first wave. Nations collapsed, governments vanished, and entire cultures were erased in hours. The earth was bleeding, and the invaders circled overhead like vultures preparing for the final strike. But deep underground, hidden in bunkers and mountain bases, leaders and scientists gathered. They stared at maps covered in red, at cities marked only by smoke, and they knew the truth. Humanity could not win this war in the open. The enemy's power was too great. Yet as hopelessness filled the room, one truth cut through the despair. Humanity had not been given a choice. There was no surrender. There was no mercy. The aliens had not come to rule, only to destroy. And so a new fire was born. Not in the sky, but in the hearts of the survivors. It was the fire of defiance. Children who had seen their homes destroyed held onto their parents' hands with iron grips. Soldiers swore oaths to fight until their last breath. Scientists whispered of hidden weapons, of secret projects buried deep in forgotten places. The aliens had burned Earth's cities, but in doing so, they had lit something stronger than their weapons. They had united humanity in pain, in rage, and in determination. That day, as the world turned to ash, the people of Earth understood one truth. Humanity might fall, but it would not fall quietly. And even if only one chance remained, one last shot in the dark, they would take it. Because if this was the end, then humanity would make sure the universe remembered them, not as victims, but as fighters. Beneath the broken mountains of Switzerland, far away from the burning cities above, a secret bunker remained alive. Its walls were thick with steel and rock, designed for the darkest of days. Now that day had come. Inside, survivors of governments and armies gathered for what they called the Last War Council. The bunker was filled with heavy silence. Screens along the wall showed only ruins. New York's skyline reduced to rubble. Moscow swallowed in fire, Karachi drowned in smoke, and London's streets scattered with ash. Every image was a wound that cut deep into the hearts of those who watched. Men and women who once held power over nations now sat with pale faces and shaking hands. Presidents, generals, scientists, they looked less like leaders and more like ghosts. Each carried the same question: what is left of humanity? The air was tense. Voices began to rise. Some demanded surrender. They are too powerful, one man cried. We cannot fight them. We must beg for mercy. Mercy? Another voice shouted back. Did you not see what they did? Did you not watch our cities burn? They don't want surrender. They want extinction. The room fell into chaos. Anger, despair, and fear clashed like storms. People shouted over each other, some pounding their fists on the table, others burying their faces in their hands. Then a voice cut through the noise. Firm, calm, unshaken. It was General Elias Ward, a man with gray hair and tired eyes, but a spine that seemed made of iron. He had lost his family in the first strikes, yet he stood tall, his voice carrying the weight of every soldier who had died defending Earth. Enough, Ward said. His voice silenced the council. We can cry later. We can mourn later, but now we fight. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Some were filled with doubt, others with desperate hope. Ward took a slow breath and spoke again. The aliens think we are broken. They think we are already dead. But they are wrong. Humanity has one weapon left. The kind they cannot predict, the kind they cannot defend against. Whispers spread through the room. What weapon could he mean? Armies had been destroyed. Satellites had fallen. Earth's fleets were gone. Ward stepped forward and revealed the truth. Years ago, our scientists built something. A weapon hidden where no alien eyes could see. It rests on the dark side of the moon. A prototype rail cannon built to launch a payload into deep space. It was never finished, never tested, but it still exists. The council listened in silence. Hope flickered like a dying flame, small but real. Ward's eyes hardened. That cannon can fire one shot, only one. And we still have a payload, an antimatter warhead enough to tear apart a fleet. If we can strike their command ship, we can end this war. Gasps filled the room. Some leaned forward with excitement. Others shook their heads in disbelief. One woman whispered, "It is madness." The chance of success? It must be nothing, Ward nodded. Less than 10%, maybe even less. But it is still a chance. And it is all we have left. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. 10% against extinction. Was it worth it? A young scientist finally stood. His voice trembled, but his words were steady. If even 1 in 100 can save Earth, then it must be done. Better to fight with hope than die with none. One by one, others began to agree. Old rivalries faded. Old borders no longer mattered. There were no more nations, no more flags. There was only Earth, broken but alive, facing its last battle together. General Ward looked at the council, his chest rising with pride and sorrow. We are not fighting for victory, he said. We are fighting for survival, for our children, for the memory of every soul burned in their fire. Humanity will not go quietly into the dark. We will strike back. The council rose to its feet, not with cheers, but with grim determination. Tears glistened in their eyes, but behind the tears burned something stronger: defiance. That night, the last war council signed no treaty, passed no law, and declared no surrender. Instead, they made a single promise. Humanity would take its last shot. And with it, they would make the galaxy remember the name of Earth. The decision was made. Humanity would put everything on one final gamble. The room where the last war council had met no longer echoed with arguments. Now it echoed with silence, the kind that comes when people realize their lives depend on a single hope. General Elias Ward stood before the gathered leaders and survivors, his face lit by the faint glow of the screens. Behind him, the ruins of Earth cities burned on the monitors. He pointed toward the stars. There, he said, his voice steady. On the dark side of the moon lies humanity's last weapon, a rail cannon built for deep space warfare. It was never tested. It was never meant to be used like this. But now it is all we have. The room was heavy with fear and awe, a cannon on the moon, hidden in silence for years, waiting like a sleeping giant. It was only a prototype, never completed for war. But in its belly rested the power to fire something no alien ship could outrun. Ward explained further. We still have one payload, a warhead made of antimatter, small in size but powerful enough to destroy anything it touches. If it strikes their command ship, the entire swarm will collapse, cut off the head, and the body D. As murmurs spread among the leaders, they understood what he meant. The Zeroth swarm's fleet was connected, guided by the mind at the center. If the command ship fell, their invasion would unravel, but doubt still lingered. A woman with tired eyes asked, "What if we miss? What if the cannon fails?" Ward met her gaze, his voice hard as stone. "Then Earth dies. But if we do nothing, Earth still dies. We must take this chance." The words sank deep. There was no other path. Humanity had been cornered, beaten, and burned. But here, in the ashes, they found one last spark. A team of volunteers stepped forward. Soldiers who had fought in broken streets, engineers who had built rockets in better days, scientists who had watched their families vanish in fire. None of them expected to return. They were not chosen for survival. They were chosen for courage. Among them was Captain Mira Hayes, a young pilot who had once dreamed of exploring the stars, not fighting within them. Her eyes were red from grief, but her voice was calm when she said, "If the moon holds our last hope, then I will carry it." Beside her stood Dr. Aran Patel, the scientist who had helped design the cannon years ago. He whispered, "I thought it would never be used. Now I pray it works." They, along with others, would board the ship that would take them to the lunar base. They would prepare the cannon, arm the warhead, and fire humanity's final shot. The plan spread through the survivors across Earth. Broken radios carried the news. Whispered voices in ruined shelters passed the word. People lifted their heads from the ashes, holding on to the fragile hope that humanity was not yet finished. Children asked their parents, "Will they save us?" And parents answered with trembling voices, "Yes, they will." Above, the alien fleet continued its slow orbit, preparing for the final strike to erase Earth completely. The invaders showed no fear. Why would they? To them, humanity was already dead, but deep beneath the mountains a secret had been revealed. And soon, on the dark side of the moon, a cannon would awaken. General Ward stood at the council's end and gave his final command. "This is not just a weapon. This is our voice. One shot to speak for all of humanity. One shot to tell them, we will not bow." The room rose to its feet, not with cheers, but with silent respect. Every person there knew the truth. Their survival rested not on armies or fleets, but on one shot in the darkness. And so humanity's last gamble began. A journey to the moon, a weapon of impossible power and a chance so small it could barely be called hope. But it was enough. For humanity had always lived on hope. The ship was called Dauntless. Its name was chosen long ago, before the invasion, back when humanity still dreamed of reaching the stars. Now it carried no explorers, no tourists, no scientists seeking new worlds. It carried warriors, engineers, and dreamers who had nothing left to lose. The launch was silent, hidden beneath the night sky. No great fanfare, no cheering crowds, only the whispers of survivors watching from the ruins, their faces lit by the faint glow of the rockets. For many, this was the first time they had seen hope rise into the sky since the invasion began. Inside the ship, the crew strapped themselves into their seats. Captain Mira Hayes sat at the front, her hand steady on the controls. She looked around at her team, soldiers with scars, scientists with tired eyes, engineers who had built weapons with shaking hands. They were not strangers anymore. Grief had made them family. The engines roared, the earth trembled, and the Dauntless rose above the smoke and fire. Through the windows, the crew watched their broken world grow smaller and smaller, until it was just a wounded sphere in the darkness of space. No one spoke for a long time. The silence was heavy. Each of them knew the truth: they might never return. Yet none of them felt regret. Humanity's last chance was in their hands, and that was enough. Dr. Aran Patel, his voice quiet but steady, finally broke the silence. "When I was a boy, I dreamed of looking at Earth from space. I never thought I would see it like this." His eyes glistened with tears. "But even broken, it is beautiful." The others nodded. For a moment, they forgot the war. They forgot the fear. They only saw their home, scarred, bleeding, but alive. And that gave them strength. Hours passed as the Dauntless moved through the void. The alien fleet hung far above Earth, massive ships drifting like dark predators. The crew held their breath each time the scanners lit with movement, afraid the enemy might notice them. But luck or fate guided them through the shadows. Finally, the moon came into view. Its surface was gray and silent, untouched by the flames that had consumed Earth. And there, hidden deep within its craters, was the base. Abandoned for years, forgotten by most, but waiting like a buried sword. The Dauntless descended slowly, dust rising as its landing gear touched the lunar surface. The crew stepped out into the silence of the moon, their boots pressing into soft dust that had not been disturbed for decades. Above them, the Earth hung in the sky, half covered in fire and shadow. The base was quiet, lifeless. Its doors were heavy with dust, its lights long dead. But the crew worked quickly, forcing the ancient systems to awaken. Power lines groaned, metal doors creaked open, and one by one the lights flickered to life. At the heart of the base they found it, the rail cannon. A giant of steel and silence built to fire into the stars. It was covered in dust, its circuit sleeping, but it was intact. The weapon of last resort still waited. Dr. Patel ran his hands over the machine, whispering to himself. It still breathes. We can make it live again. The engineers worked without rest, reconnecting wires, fueling generators, repairing broken systems with whatever tools they had left. Sparks filled the air, sweat clung to their foreheads, and hope pushed them forward. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes gathered the soldiers. They stood guard, knowing the aliens would soon sense movement. Every second counted. Every moment brought the enemy closer. When the cannon finally hummed to life, the crew stared in awe. It was not just a weapon. It was humanity's voice, a cry of defiance sent into the endless dark. Captain Hayes touched the controls gently, her voice soft but strong. We came here with nothing. We have one chance. We will not fail. Above them, the alien fleet moved closer, preparing for their final blow against Earth. They had no idea what was waiting on the moon. The journey was over. The preparation was done. Now came the strike that would decide the fate of humanity. And deep in the silence of the moon, the cannon waited to speak. The moon was silent. But inside the hidden base, every heartbeat felt like thunder. The rail cannon stood ready, its steel frame trembling with power as it came alive for the first time in years. The antimatter warhead rested in its chamber, a small object that carried the weight of all humanity. Captain Mira Hayes stood at the command console, her hands steady though her heart raced. Around her, the crew worked quickly. Soldiers at the perimeter, engineers checking systems, scientists watching the countdown. They all knew what this moment meant. There would be no second shot. If they failed, Earth would burn completely. Dr. Aaron Patel adjusted the final settings on the cannon. His voice cracked as he spoke. Once we fire, there is no turning back. The warhead will either save us, or end us with it. Captain Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. It will save us. It has to. Far above them, the alien fleet shifted. The massive shadow of the command ship moved into position. Its size was monstrous, a floating city of war, covered in jagged armor and glowing weapons. Smaller ships circled it like wolves guarding their alpha. The enemy was preparing for their final strike against Earth. Inside the lunar base, the countdown began. 10 minutes until the cannon fired. 10 minutes until humanity's last gamble was unleashed. The crew fell into silence, each lost in their thoughts. One soldier whispered a prayer. Another kissed a photo of his family. Dr. Patel stared at the Earth through a small window, whispering, "Hold on, just a little longer." General Elias Ward, back on Earth, listened to the transmission from the moon. His voice came through the radio, rough but steady. "The world is watching you, dauntless crew. Every survivor is with you. You are not alone." Captain Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, drawing strength from his words. Then the alarms blared. The alien fleet had noticed. Sensors lit up with warnings. The command ship was turning, weapons powering, its scanners locked onto the moon. "They know," a soldier shouted. "They found us." "Then we don't wait," Hayes answered. "Prepare to fire." The crew rushed into action. The cannon glowed brighter, its systems humming with dangerous energy. Sparks shot from the walls as the base strained under the power it carried. The warhead chamber locked and the countdown accelerated. Outside, alien ships broke formation. Beams of light shot across space, tearing through the void as they aimed at the moon. Explosions rocked the surface, dust rising like storms. The ground shook, cracks forming in the ancient base. "Shields are failing," an engineer shouted. "Hold them back," Hayes commanded. "Just a few more seconds." The crew fired old defense turrets, but they were weak against the alien fire. Still, they held on. Every second mattered. Every second brought them closer to the moment of truth. Finally, the cannon reached full power. A warning siren screamed through the base, and the warhead chamber glowed with deadly light. Captain Hayes stood tall, her hand hovering over the final switch. She thought of her family, of the burning cities, of the children hiding in the ruins of Earth. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "This is for all of us." She pressed the switch, the rail cannon roared. A flash of blinding light filled the chamber as the warhead shot into the darkness. The sound was like thunder rolling through the moon itself. The projectile streaked across space faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. The command ship reacted instantly, weapons firing in panic. Beams of fire cut across the void, trying to catch the warhead. Smaller ships moved to block it, sacrificing themselves, but the projectile ripped through them like paper. Inside the base, the crew held their breath. The screen showed the warhead flying straight toward the heart of the alien fleet. And then, silence. The warhead was seconds away. Earth itself seemed to pause. Every survivor, every soldier, every child waiting for the answer to a single question. Would it strike true? Word count, 54. The warhead cut through space like a falling star. It blazed brighter and brighter, a streak of hope against the black void. In the lunar base, the crew leaned forward, their eyes locked on the screens. On Earth, survivors huddled around broken radios and flickering monitors, whispering prayers. All of humanity waited for the strike. The alien fleet reacted with desperation. Their smaller ships threw themselves in the path of the projectile, but they shattered like glass. Their weapons fired again and again, beams of searing light tearing across the void, yet the warhead was too fast. Nothing could stop it now. The command ship loomed ahead, a monster of steel and shadow, its surface bristling with weapons. It tried to turn away, its shields flaring with energy. But it was too late. The warhead struck. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then light. A brilliant explosion lit up the heavens, brighter than the sun. The antimatter core collapsed in on itself, then expanded outward with unstoppable fury. The blast ripped through the command ship, tearing its monstrous body apart piece by piece. Armor melted, engines cracked, and fire consumed its heart. The shockwave spread through the fleet. Ships caught in its path were torn apart instantly, their fragments scattering across the void. Those farther away lost power, their systems collapsing as the network that bound them together shattered. On Earth, people looked up at the sky and gasped. For weeks, the heavens had been filled with shadows. Now those shadows burned, falling like meteors into the oceans and deserts. The invincible swarm was breaking, its power crumbling before their eyes. In the lunar base, the crew erupted with cries of disbelief and joy. Some wept, others hugged tightly, unable to believe what they were seeing. Captain Mira Hayes stood still, tears running down her face as she whispered, "We did it." Dr. Aaron Patel's hands shook as he pressed them against the console. His voice was barely more than a breath. It worked. By God, it worked. But the celebration was brief. The base shook as alien weapons, still active, lashed out in blind retaliation. The swarm was dying, but not yet gone. The crew knew they would not survive the counterattack. Hayes turned to her team. "We knew this was the price. We gave humanity a chance. That is enough." Her words carried no fear, only pride. The soldiers tightened their grips on their rifles. The engineers stood firm beside their machines. No one ran. No one begged. They had already won the only victory that mattered. Back on Earth, General Elias Ward stood among the survivors, watching the skies. When the command ship broke apart in the explosion, his voice cracked as he whispered, "The swarm is finished." Around him, people fell to their knees, crying, laughing, holding each other. For the first time since the invasion began, the world breathed again. The alien fleet scattered. Without their command, they were no longer a swarm, just broken pieces of a dying beast. Some ships drifted powerless into space. Others fell into Earth's gravity, crashing in fire and ruin. The threat that had seemed eternal was gone in moments, but the crew of the Dauntless did not live to see the peace they created. The alien counterattack struck the lunar base, tearing through its walls and shattering its systems. Inside, Captain Hayes and her team stood together as the roof caved in, holding on to each other in their final moments. They did not scream. They did not run. They met the end with the same courage that had carried them to the moon. Their sacrifice was the final note of the battle, the price of humanity's survival. As the fires faded from the sky, Earth was left in silence. A broken world, scarred and bleeding, but alive. Humanity had faced extinction and struck back with a single shot. And against all odds, that shot had ended the war.